This is the second video for factoring trinomials, and we are on the method trial and check. So I'm suggesting that you use trial and check when your leading coefficient, in this case it's a 7, when your leading coefficient is a prime number, because there are only two numbers that would equal 7, right? 7 times 1, or 1 times 2 if you look at this next one. Remember that we're going to use this method where we write out the factors of the ax squared, and then we write out the factors of the c, and then we try to combine them in such a way that we can get the middle term, 2x in this case. All right, so let's write out factors of 7x squared and factors of -5. So 7x squared would just be 7x times x. And on 5, now we actually have two possibilities on the -5 because it has to do with signs, right? 5 is actually a prime number, but we could have a -1 times +5, or we could have a -5 times +1. So we actually have to maybe work with both of those depending on how it's placed in the binomials. Okay, so let's look at what we've got here. We know the first two terms are definitely going to be 7x times x. That's why I'm saying if you use primes, only leading coefficients that are primes, then you won't have to figure out anything else. So you'll only have the one pair that equals your x squared term. Now we have to try -1 and 5, and that means we could possibly try this 4 times. But if you want to think about it, my middle term is a 2, right? And so if I am thinking through this in a logical way, I might know how to place this, okay? Because if I put the 5s, right, the 5 or the -5 opposite the 7, I'm going to get -35. And so if you just think about that and think, I don't think that 35 or a -35 is going to be needed here. And so in that case, I'm going to place a 5 here and a 1 there. Now I have to decide on my signs, right? Am I going to make the 5 the -1 or the 1 the -1? Well, let's look at this, right? So I'm going to look at this term and this term. I have a 7x for sure on this one, and I need to get a +2 when I add them. So I think it makes sense, right, that we're going to make the 5 the one that's negative, because then 7x minus 5x is 2x, and you can see that this one works. Now I'm just trying to talk you through the process you might go through when you are factoring in this way. So our answer is, our factored form is going to be 7x minus 5 times x plus 1. We've really already checked everything to see that it works, but to be on the safe side, you can do that again if needed. Okay, so let's look at this next one. Factors of 2x squared are 2x times x. Factors of -3, kind of the same thing as the previous question, right? It's either -1 times 3 or it's -3 times 1. Okay. Our middle term this time is a -5x. Okay, so that's what we're looking for when we are trial and checking here. So we have the 2x and the x, and then we have to decide how to put these numbers in. Now you might just start out and say, hey, I think I'll just put in -1 and +3 because that's the order that I had those written in. Well, let's just check that and see what happens. Okay, so you see that's a -1, and this is 6x, and that gives me a +5. So that might make you think, hey, wait a minute, right? I put this in this way, but what if I just switched the signs? What would happen then? So let's look at that. If we have 2x plus 1 and x minus 3, is that going to work? And so we are going to check that. And hopefully you're following with me. I'm going to scoot that just a little bit. 2x plus 1 and x minus 3. So all I did there was switch the signs. So I still have a positive 1 and negative 3, right? I have to have one of them negative to multiply to get negative 3. And when I check, I have a 1x and negative 6x. When I add those together, it does equal negative 5x. So this is the combination that works. That's the factored form that I need. So it's 2x plus 1 times x minus 3, right? And that's our factored form. Okay, I have just one more of these. On this one, based on signs, I'm going to make sure that we look at the signs as we go here. So my x squared term will just be 3x times x. Oh, it's doing some weird stuff to me. And then, okay, I had to pause for a moment and then come back in. Okay, so 3x times x is 3x squared, and then we're finding factors of 10, right? 10 is 2 times 5 or 1 times 10. In this case, we're going to have negatives on both of those to get a negative 17 for our middle term, because when we add them, it needs to be a negative. So it's negative 1 times negative 10, or it's negative 2 times negative 5, and those are our choices for this one. Okay, and so we're going to try this. Let's see, we'll just do 3x and 1x. And how about negative 1 and negative 10? Well, I think that's going to be a little big, right? Because that's going to give me negative 30x. So we can see that one's not going to work out, right? And this would be negative 1x. Okay, so what if we put these in the other order? 3x minus 10 times x minus 1, and let's check that. So we have negative 10x and we have negative 3x. Once again, we don't get our target goal of negative 17, so we have to try something else. You guys see this can go pretty quickly. You can check these and be on to the next possibility. So let's see, what if we did negative 2 and then we have x minus 5 and check those. So we've got negative 2x, negative 15x, and there's our sum that we need, right? So here we go with the factored form that checks. All right, so that's it. Because we just have to figure out how to get that sum of negative 17. Okay, negative 17x in this case. Okay. So that's the trial and check method, and that method is one that you may or may not use. Some students, this is how that they've learned this in the past at some point, so that's kind of up to you on how you go with this. All right, so here's the next one. Now this method's called grouping. I also, in other books that I've taught from, called this or the AC method, right? And that's because we multiply the A times C and then we try to find a sum that equals the B. Okay, so A times C to get the B, and then we write the term bx as a sum by using the factors found in step 1. This probably sounds confusing, but I'm going to show you exactly how this works. And then we factor by grouping. So it's probably going to make more sense as I show you what to do here. Okay, so here's what we do. We multiply the A times the C, right? So we're going to find factors of A times C, which would be 24. And then we need a sum of, my middle term is the B, right? So I need a sum of 11. So you guys, we've already kind of talked about this sum, right? Now I have to just go through factors of 24 until I find a sum of 11. This was, you know, we kind of did some of this on that first method whenever our leading coefficient was 1. So if you start thinking through all the factors of 24, 24 has a lot of factors, so I'm not going to write them all down. Hopefully you can latch on to factors of 3 and 8, right? 3 times 8 is 24. 3 plus 8 is 11. Now, depending on this number, this, you know, the one that we're finding the factors of, you may have to list out some of them. You've seen me do that. Or you may be able to just kind of think through. A lot of times writing it down is good because then you remember which ones you've already checked. And then here's what we do. We take the trinomial without the middle term, but we are going to place the 3 and the 8 into the, we're going to have 2 terms in place of the middle term. That's what I'm trying to say. So it's going to be a 3x and an 8x. So 11x is 3x plus 8x. So it has to equal that middle term, and then plus 4. So notice I kept my first and last terms. I replaced the middle term with 2 terms. And then we do the grouping, which I taught you previous to this lesson, right? We've already learned the grouping. So once we get to this point, hopefully you're understanding that part and it goes quickly. Okay, so we factor out the common factor for my first 2 terms because I've grouped this, and that would be 3x, and it leaves me with 2x plus 1. On the second 2 terms, my common factor is 4. And so that's 2x plus 1. And then I just write this in factored form. My common binomial is the 2x plus 1. And then my other binomial is 3x plus 4. And so that is the method. This will work with any of these, any trinomial that you're trying to factor. And notice when the leading coefficient is 1, we kind of start out the same exact way, and then we go from there. All right, I think we have time for maybe one more. Okay, so this one is factors of my A and my C. So 6 times 12 is negative, or no, 6 times 12 is not negative because these are both positive. Positive 72, I was looking at the middle term. And then I need a sum of negative 17. Okay, now 72 has a whole bunch of factors, and so you might start working your way through, you know, how am I going to get all these factors listed out? And so it could turn into quite a few. But I know that 72 is 8 times 9. They both have to be negative, remember, to get a positive product and a negative sum. Negative 8 plus negative 9 is negative 17. One of the common mistakes students make is to get signs mixed up. If you get your signs mixed up, then when you factor, it doesn't factor correctly. Okay, so here's the AC, or the grouping method, right? I'm going to replace negative 17x with negative 8x and negative 9x. And you guys, it doesn't matter which order you put those in. The negative 9x could come first or second, right? It doesn't matter. Because if you found the right 2 numbers, then it's going to factor properly. Okay, then we group, and so we take out the common factor for the 12x squared and the negative 8x, which would be a 4x. That leaves me 3x minus 2. And then on the second pair, remember this negative has to come here, right? Don't forget that. And I'm going to factor out a negative 3. So that leaves me with a positive 3x and a negative 2. And then factored form, 3x minus 2, my common binomial, and then my other binomial is the 4x minus 3. And then we have it factored, and it's in factored form. That's it. Okay, so I'm going to stop this video, and then we'll have more.